A fugue, in music, is a contrapuntal composition in which a short melody or phrase, the subject, is introduced by one part and successively taken up by others and developed by interweaving all of the parts. Now, I was going to make a joke about her name not making any sense, but considering how Ruan Mei mixed and matched Tingyun pieces like Legos, I kinda get it. Now, if only we could get 5-star Yansheng. Our second Fire Nihility Foxian with a debuff that increases your team's damage and an ultimate that makes her eyes glow yellow with a slow motion close-up is finally here. Yeah, I'm just not really asking questions anymore. In today's video, I'm gonna be teaching you everything there is to know about Fugue, including how to build her, without performing experiments. My name is Braxophone, but you can call me Brax, and let's talk about Fugue. Oh snap, Hoyo saw how many people were running Super Break with Remembrance MC coming out in a patch, and they said, hey, maybe we should make another one of those. Unfortunately, this one comes at the cost of your wallet, but I think the saying goes, you Super Break it, you buy it.
And that's pretty cool.
Like regular Tingyun, her skill still targets an ally, and they get a buff that lasts 3 turns, except these are Fugue's turns, which means that she is basically guaranteed to be SP positive overall. The buff gives 30% break effect, but more importantly, it makes it so any enemy hit by that ally has a 100% base chance to shred enemy defense. On top of that though, that ally can break toughness of any element. Silverwolf found dead in a ditch. It's only 50% of the original toughness reduction, but I've always been told size doesn't matter. While her skill is up, her basic attack does blast damage, so it's easier to break multiple enemies at a time. But that's not all that she does. She's also steroids for Himiko. Nek-chan gives enemies exo toughness, which for her kit has been renamed to Cloud Flame Luster. This is an extra layer of toughness that the enemy always has when Fugue is on the field, and after you break their initial toughness bar and the enemy gets stunned, you can tackle their exo toughness. That extra toughness is only 40% of the original toughness bar, again size doesn't matter, but when you break the enemy again, it does full break damage. And whenever an enemy is weakness broken, she adds super break damage to any hits dealt. This takes effect even if the exo toughness layer is there, since the enemy is weakness broken when you actually get the chance to break that second bar. So basically, Fugue is Harmony MC Pro Max.
And it will still start at $15.99.
For Himiko specifically, she lets you get more stacks towards her follow-up more quickly. This makes Himiko one of the strongest standard 5 stars, all because one character's mechanics buffed them a ridiculous amount. All in all, Fugue really puts the harm in holy shit their allies were fucking decimated. All of that was based on her talent alone, but there's also some major traces that make her even more useful. For example, Harmony MC delays enemy actions by 30% once they're broken. Fugue does this too, delaying enemies by 15%, but being able to delay twice due to the exo toughness. By the way, if you stack up both Harmony MC and Fugue, you can get 45% action delay 2 times, which is insane. But Fugue also gives your teammates bonus break effect when an enemy gets their weakness broken, up to 36% total with enough break effect on Fugue. And getting that level of break effect isn't difficult with the right build, especially since she gets 30% break effect for free with her Sylvan Enigma trace. She also gets a skill point back on her first skill, which is actually a way bigger help than you might think. Fugue is Tingyun, but hotter. With relatable gacha player reading skills, we might as well call her Fuego. As for her ultimate, Fugue's ultimate deals AoE fire damage and ignores enemy weakness type. Did you think there was gonna be more? No, that's it. Her ultimate does a fair bit of weakness break, but it's not all that necessary. I usually just save it for new waves of enemies if I'm zero cycling, but other than that, most of you guys can just use it when there's a good opportunity to break or dish out super break damage. Lastly, Kantata's technique dazes enemies, and when you enter battle, she gets a 40% action forward and 100% base chance to reduce enemy defense. You'll basically always want to use her technique in endgame because it lets you set her up immediately. For talent priority on Master Fugue, you want to level her skill and talent both to level 10, and I'm not gonna lie, her basic attack and ultimate just don't really matter. At moments like these, right before we transition to another section, it's important to know that thinking Fugue is attractive doesn't make you a furry. It does, however, make you mentally ill. It's me, I'm mentally ill. I think it's pretty safe to say at this point, Yaimiko has competition for most simped for Fox Girl in the Hoyoverse, and her name is Fei Xiao. Sorry, Ruan Mei, you gotta put more muscles on her if you want her to win. People like being stepped on and all that. As far as relic sets go though, I'd say Fugue is winning, since she can use any break effect set or speed set. Her best option is Iron Cavalry for the 4-piece set that gives defense ignore and the 2-piece set that gives break effect. Mixing 2-piece sets of break effect and speed bonus is also solid though, and can be better than 4-piece cavalry sometimes, just depending on your substats and the overall speed. Normally for a break support, I'd recommend the Watchmaker set, but the 4-piece effect of that only works if you ult your team, and Fugui's ult only works on the enemy. As far as planar ornaments go, I'm using Calpagni because it gives speed and also break effect against fire weak enemies. But with that said, Talia can also be a decent planar set for the bonus break effect stats. I also want to shout out Sprightly Vonwalk because it gives a huge action forward at the start of the fight. And that might not seem like much, but Vonwalk and 147 total speed can give you an extra action in cycle 0, which can be an extra skill point back and can also help you get your ultimate again before the cycle ends, just in case you need it. For her chest piece, you'll want to aim for effect hit rate, so that way you have a higher chance of inflicting her defense shred debuff. On her boots, you'll want to run speed because no other boot stat will help you, like at all. And on her orb, you can pick something like HP or defense. For her rope, I recommend using a break effect one, since you want to share more break effect with your team from her passive trace, and her ult kinda does nothing. Technically, you can use an energy regen rope, but whether or not it will actually be faster than using a break rope depends on how much damage and break you can make up with the use of 1 or 2 extra Fugue ultimates. In my opinion, using a break effect rope is just a lot more straightforward and it's gonna benefit more people, but if you're hyper optimized, energy regen rope can be fine. Side note, as I was recording this, I realized that SP positive sounds like she contracted some sort of disease, which honestly maybe she did when she was with Ruan Mei. But since she's SP positive, I recommend building the Firefox faster than Firefox. She'll get more opportunities to use her blast basic attack and AoE ultimate if you do build her fast. The only downside is that her buffs drop off faster, but if you're managing your skill points, that's not going to be an issue. Speed and break effect are her best substats, but effect hit rate and effect res aren't bad to get at all. When you're in combat, you need to hit 220% total break effect to max out her break effect share. So you'll want at least 190% in her relics and or light cone after her personal 30% gain that she gets for free. And if you're playing with Ruan Mei, you actually only need 170%. If you're looking for an exact amount of effect hit rate, technically 67% will let you hit basically everything, but if you build her fast, you can kind of counteract that with just more actions and less effect hit rate. Now, if you look at the screen, hopefully you've been looking at the screen, here's a quick summary of Oratorio's build. This might change in the future if we get more break support sets that are skill focused or just planar ornaments, but in the meantime, this is what we have. If I had $1 for every fox girl that came back to life in Honkai Star Rail, I'd have $1. Subscribe if you love hags. Fugue's light cone situation is a little strange, because everything is just fine, much like her signature light cone's art, which is hella fine. Concerto's light cone gives 60% break effect at S1 and also a chance to put a break damage vuln on enemies who get their weakness broken. This might be one of the least important light cones to have for a premium character, just because your best 4-star option gives a ton of value, but it is a decent light cone overall. But as for 4 stars, Resolution Shines as Pearls of Sweat is an incredible light cone for Fugue, and it's the light cone that I chose to use for this video to make it #relatable. It has a base chance to inflict a defense down, which when added to Fugue's normal defense shred can massively increase your team's damage output. Solitary healing from Herta's shop can also be really strong for the 40% break effect at S5, and because breaking with fire gives damage over time, Fugue can technically get the 6 energy from the light cone's dot effect as long as she's the one that triggers the break. Other than that, basically anything that gives effect hit rate can be decent to increase your odds of landing your defense shred debuff. But honestly, I recommend using Lukac, his light cone specifically, because it's just so good and no other Nihility 4-star really comes close at the moment. I'd give you a light cone ranking, but the budget didn't allow for this one. So instead, I'll just talk about Fugue's best teams. Here we are with the most beautiful Foxian aside from the one that could literally beat me to a pulp. Fugue's teams are pretty straightforward because they're mostly just break teams except you replace one character. She can be played with characters like Firefly, Rappa, Boot Hill, Shuri, anyone that can do break damage, she can be played with. But I do want to talk about a couple things that people have brought up on my other pre-release video because I wanted to make sure everyone fully understood where this character was actually good and an upgrade. So here's a Firefly team, and most people that I've seen talking about Firefly and Fugue say that Fugue is actually not that great for Firefly, but a lot of people have gotten confused in the nuance of it. Fugue is actually incredible for Firefly. The narrative going around is that Fugue isn't that good for Firefly because Harmony Trailblazer's super break modifiers are better, and she doesn't really benefit from being able to break enemy weaknesses that aren't weak to fire because she implants fire weaknesses to begin with. However, Fugue does more than just give you super break. Fugue also gives you that defense shred. Fugue also gives you some break effects, and Fugue herself can use a light cone that also applies even more defense shred. Now, if you're getting into the nitty gritty of it, Firefly can use a set like most other break characters that ignores defense. Fugue is able to stack up those defense shreds and makes it very, very strong. But one of the best places to use Fugue is in a team with Trailblazer as well, because if you combine both of these, you're getting multiple instances of super break. You're getting super break from Firefly, super break from Fugue, super break from Harmony Trailblazer, and every one of these characters is at least getting both Trailblazer and Fugue's super breaks. Not to mention that Linkshaw is an absolute powerhouse, and this team is easily one of the strongest break teams in the entire game. With that said though, I know 3.0 is coming up and not everyone's gonna be playing Harmony Trailblazer because they're gonna be playing Remembrance Trailblazer. And in that case, you can just run Roland May instead. And this is basically your classic Firefly super break team. And then I just put Gallagher here to show you that, yeah, you can use Gallagher, that's fine. Another cool team that Fugue can be a part of though is going to be the full-on Abundance Propagation Linkshaw build, which is using Roland May, Fugue, and Harmony Trailblazer. So you're getting the 50% weakness break efficiency from Roland May, you're getting Harmony Trailblazer's super break and action delay, and you're getting Fugue's break anything body fluids. This team is full of beautiful women and an actual raccoon, but all these women together will break enemies like they break hearts. Absolutely incredible team, and if you don't have Firefly but you do have Linkshaw, congratulations. Linkshaw is the new Firefly. Some other characters that you can use are Shui, Rappa, and Himiko. Now, Rappa is actually the character, in my opinion, that Fugue was actually made for, because Rappa's whole deal is that she actually gains stacks whenever enemies are broken, and Exo Toughness allows you to get more of those stacks because you're applying more breaks to the enemy. And by breaking the enemy more times, Rappa can actually dish out more damage and more break herself. So it creates this sort of snowball effect. If you replaced Firefly in this team with Rappa, you would get a lot of value. And of course, if you want to, you can replace Harmony Trailblazer with Roland May. That way you can save your Remembrance Trailblazer when they come out. Now, Shrey actually has one of the biggest benefits from this because her problem is that she can, with her ultimate, break anyone's toughness, but in order to get stacks for her follow-up and make her actually dish out a ton of damage, she really needs to be hitting enemies that are weak to her element, which is Quantum. And Fugue makes it so that doesn't matter as much. You can still hit for half of the overall toughness bar that you would normally be hitting. And then if you add in Ron May, it's a little bit more. This really brings Shrey back, especially if you have Eidolons on Shrey. Her being able to proc so many more follow-up attacks because she can break any element now is so beneficial. Fugue definitely replaces Bronya in this team. In my opinion, there's not really any question about it. There may be some instances where if you're against quantum weak enemies, that's a little less relevant, but the amount of damage you can get with Fugue and Shrey on the same team, especially with Ron May, is just really impressive for a 4-star. She's definitely not going to be up there at the top like Firefly, Rappa, Boot Hill, and all of them, but for a 4-star, she's putting in work. If you watched my video on which 5-star to pick from the selector, I mentioned that Himiko had gotten a lot better in the game just overall. Obviously for pure fiction, she's an incredible pick, but with Fugue, she's also very strong in even Memory of Chaos now. Especially if you go to the current Memory of Chaos that's up when Fugue is active, Himiko is a very powerful character. Now the reason is because Himiko actually gets stacks based on every enemy that gets weakness broken up to a maximum of 3 stacks. Once she has 3 stacks, she launches a follow-up attack that is an AoE and hits everyone. So with Fugue and Exo Toughness now being in the game, Himiko can get even more stacks, proc more follow-ups, and do even more break damage. And also now that Fugue is out, there's no longer a reason to run hybrid Himiko where you're trying to dish out more damage that isn't actually break damage. And the reason is because before you would have this issue where if an enemy wasn't weak to fire, you would have to knock out that enemy anyways because you couldn't actually break them. And if you were built to all break, you couldn't really deal with those smaller adds. Well, now you can because Fugue allows you to break anything. So Himiko really shines in this specific team comp, and of course you can replace Trailblazer with Ron May, but I'm really loving the full-on super break here. And not last and not least, we're gonna talk about Space Cowboy. Boot Hill and Fugue, Pretty Foxy Lady, and Cowboy, by the way, they work great together. One of Boot Hill's biggest issues is that he can take a minute to ramp up. You need his ultimate to apply the physical weakness, and he needs max pocket trick shots to get the most damage possible. Well, because of Fugue and because of Exo Toughness, Fugue can instantly instantly give Boothill 3 stacks of Pocket Trick Shot. All you need to do is have an enemy that is smaller and easier to be defeated, and in one standoff with that enemy, you can break their normal toughness, their exo toughness, and knock them out to exit standoff and get 3 stacks immediately. This makes Boothill go from 0 to 100 in just 1 attack, which is incredibly good. And of course, Fugue allows for Super Break and Defense Shred, and just lets him break without needing to implant that physical weakness to begin with. Now, of course, planting the physical weakness is going to be better, right? Because the amount of break that he actually does is going to be reduced if they are not weak to physical, just because of how Fugue works. However, if you play him with Ruan-Mei and Fugue together, that toughness reduction that he's actually doing, stacked with the weakness break efficiency from Ruan-Mei and also the super break from Fugue, makes him an absolute powerhouse. The biggest issue with Boothill outside of those that we already talked about is with team building though, because he does want action forward sometimes, especially if you have to rush to break an enemy super fast. Like for example, Boothill's really good at handling Aventurine. However, if you take too long to break Aventurine, then you have to go through his whole dice game, which can use up a lot of your turns and honestly knock some of your characters out. There are going to be some instances where running Sunday is actually going to be more beneficial than running Fugue for him, just because of the energy he can actually give and the skill points you can get back. One other thing to note about our Space Cowboy is that he has his own break modifiers. It is not super break damage that he is doing on his own without Fugue's help. He does his own separate instances of break damage, and with more break opportunities from Fugue, he just gets a lot better. So Boothill is winning this patch for sure. All right, now lastly, I want to talk about Acheron, because a lot of you guys pulled Acheron, and I get it, man, she's hot. Listen, Fugue can work with Acheron. You can absolutely play Fugue with Acheron. She's an Nihility, and she has some defense shred, which is super nice. Acheron's toughness reduction is actually not that crazy. On her skill, it's like okay, but it's nothing insane. She was never meant to be a break character. However, Fugue is Nihility, which can power her passive that gives her a bunch more damage with up to 2 more Nihility characters. But in my opinion, I wouldn't pull Fugue specifically for Acheron. The reason I wouldn't pull Fugue for Acheron is because Xiaoshu exists, and this guy was literally made to work with Acheron. Yes, Fugue in theory can work with Acheron, and you can apply debuffs fairly frequently, especially if you go with a hyperspeed Fugue, but she's just not gonna hold up to what Xiaoshu can do for Acheron. If you're playing Fugue with Acheron, I would also consider looking at the other characters you're playing and seeing if any of them actually break more frequently than Acheron and just partnering them with Fugue for that break effect. But it's all gonna be very subjective. You can play her with Acheron, it's like fine, but I wouldn't recommend pulling her specifically for Acheron if that's what you're on the fence about. Now I have to tell you about something that's going to like break your brain probably. I don't know, it broke mine, man. It has been 3 days since I was sent to the hospital in critical condition. I'm finally beginning to recover, but I am in desperate need of elf therapy. Oh, what was I in for? Eidolon overdose. I try not to pull Eidolons on my main Star Rail account because I want it to have some semblance of relatability. However, Fugue E1 might change everything. Fugue's E1 gives her ally with her skill buff a 50% increase to weakness break efficiency. Now for reference, Ruan-Mei gives your team 50% weakness break efficiency to help them break more toughness bar. With Fugue, that reaches a total of 100%, meaning that you can break double the toughness bar with every attack, not accounting for Rappa and Firefly's efficiency increase and Boothill's toughness reduction increase. But the main reason I'm considering pulling for it is because when combined with Ruan-Mei, you can get full break value on literally anything. For example, she breaks 20 toughness on her main target with her skill. Against enemies that aren't quantum weak, she would normally only break 10 with Fugue. And that's because Fugue only allows you to break 50% of what you originally would. However, with E1 and Ruan-Mei, that becomes 20 toughness break against any enemy that's not quantum weak, and 40 toughness break against quantum weak enemies, massively buffing her. It is literally double the break. And this can apply to other characters as well. It also kind of completely fixes Boothill's dilemma, letting him get Ruan-Mei's efficiency, while you can still use an action forward character instead of Ruan-Mei if you need to. Now, to be honest, this doesn't mean you'll run Fugue Ruan-Mei in every single team in the game. E1 isn't going to make every character a break character in every team top tier. Just because you can doesn't mean you should. But I just kind of thought it was a crazy interaction. Remember though, 3.0 is coming out soon with an entirely new meta that may have nothing to do with breaking at all. So if you want to be safe, you can always look to pull Eidolons on her eventual rerun if that's something you want to do. Spend responsibly. I kind of forgot that I had to do the rest of the Eidolons. E2 is basically just Thief of Shooting Meteor. You gain 3 energy whenever an enemy gets their weakness broken, but on top of that, Eidolon 2 is also Dance Dance Dance. Hoyo forgot to make her Harmony, so they just kind of threw that in there. E2 is Giga Value, giving her a bunch more energy and a team action forward. E3 doesn't really hold a candle since it's a skill and basic attack level up. E4 is an increase to your DPS's break damage dealt. E5 is going to be an ultimate and talent level up, and E6 is a weakness break efficiency increase for Fugue that will help her actively break more. But on top of that, she shares her skill buff with every ally on your team, meaning anyone can break anything, and everyone also gets 50% more weakness break efficiency, putting Fugue at 100% and the rest of your team at 50% without Ruan Mei. With Ruan Mei, everyone can break everything for full value, which is kind of crazy. Getting E6 Fugue would essentially just make the entire game have a deletable toughness bar. But with that said, that doesn't account for the elemental resistances that still exist, so even if you break an Ice Weak enemy with a fire character, they're still gonna have 20% fire resistance. But at least you'll do more damage because that toughness bar is gone. Anyways, between Fugue Eidolons and her Light Cone, you already heard it from me once, but her Light Cone just isn't that necessary. Her E1 is crazy strong, and E2 is also diabolical for players trying to zero cycle, since you get Dance 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 for free on a Nihility character. With E2, I'd probably even go Thief of Shooting Meteor and Energy Regen Rope to spam action forwards as often as possible. You definitely don't need Eidolons or her Light Cone. This entire video's background footage was an E0 Fugue with a 4-star Light Cone, but E1 will make your break teams a lot stronger and more flexible going forward. So if you're deciding to swipe, I'd pick E1 and E2 over S1 of her Light Cone. Maybe if she didn't give everyone so much weakness break efficiency, she'd still have a neck.